Marcus Washington's hand trembled as he ended the call. The entire cabin fell silent, flight attendants frozen mid-service. "I own this airline," he whispered, his voice carrying through first class. The white flight attendant who'd refused him, a mere minutes earlier, blanched champagne bottle slipping from her grasp, shattering on the floor. Nobody moved. Marcus slid his phone into his jacket, the acquisition papers finalized during this very flight. The crew had no idea they'd been discriminating against their new boss. Would they still have jobs by sunset? Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe in justice and accountability, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about overcoming discrimination. 4 hours earlier, Marcus Washington had boarded the Legacy Airlines flight with little fanfare. At 44, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd built something from nothing. As the founder and CEO of Horizon Technologies, a company valued at $13 billion, Marcus could have chartered a private jet. Instead, he usually flew coach. "Keep yourself grounded," his mother had always said. "The moment you forget where you came from is the moment you lose yourself." Growing up in a cramped apartment in the Bronx with a single mother working 3 jobs, Marcus had learned the value of humility early. Even after his revolutionary data security algorithm had catapulted him into the ranks of tech billionaires, he'd maintained his connection to ordinary people. Today, however, was different. His assistant had apologetically informed him of a last-minute flight change. "I'm sorry, Mr. Washington, but your usual flight was canceled. I had to book you in first class on Legacy Airlines." Marcus had frowned at this news. Legacy Airlines had a reputation. Not a good one among minority travelers, according to stories he'd heard from friends and colleagues. But the confidential acquisition meeting couldn't wait. For months, he'd been quietly arranging to purchase the struggling airline, partly because of those very stories. Sometimes, real change required power from within. As he approached the check-in counter, ID and first-class ticket in hand, the attendant glanced up, then back down, her smile faltering slightly. "I'll need to see additional identification, sir." Marcus produced his passport. The attendant studied it intensely, comparing the photo to his face multiple times. "Is there a problem?" he asked politely. "Just being thorough," she replied, still scrutinizing his documents while waving through the white businessman behind him with barely a glance at his ID. Marcus took a deep breath and let it go. He was used to these subtle indignities. 20. Years of corporate success hadn't erased the suspicion that seemed to follow dark skin in luxury spaces. Today he couldn't afford to make a scene, not when he was hours away from acquiring the very airline demonstrating why such an acquisition was necessary. Boarding moved quickly. Marcus found his seat in 2A and settled in, opening his secure laptop to review the acquisition papers one last time. Everything was in order. By the end of this flight, Legacy Airlines would be under new ownership, though only his executive team and the Legacy board knew about the deal. A commotion interrupted his concentration. A tall white man in an expensive suit stood in the aisle, glaring down at him. "Excuse me, but I believe you're in my seat," the man announced loudly. Marcus looked up calmly. "2A? I don't think so, sir. This is my assigned seat." The man's face reddened. "Look, I always sit in 2A when I fly this route. There must be some mistake," his voice carried, drawing attention from other passengers still boarding. "I understand, but my boarding pass clearly shows 2A, Marcus replied, showing his ticket. "Perhaps the airline changed your seat assignment?" Instead of checking his own boarding pass, the man flagged down a passing flight attendant. "This gentleman is in my seat," he declared confidently. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Veronica Miller, turned to Marcus with immediate suspicion. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Marcus handed it over, maintaining his composure. Veronica examined it with excessive scrutiny, while other white passengers continued boarding without verification. "And your ID, please," she added. "Is that necessary? You can see the boarding pass matches," Marcus noted. "It's policy, sir," she insisted with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. After verifying that Marcus was indeed assigned to seat 2A, Veronica turned apologetically to the white passenger. I'm so sorry for the confusion, Mr. Thornton. It appears there was a change in the system. Let me find you another first-class seat immediately. This is outrageous, Thornton muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I've been a platinum member for 15 years. As the situation resolved, Marcus noticed several nearby passengers watching the scene unfold. Some with sympathy, others with thinly veiled prejudice in their eyes. He returned to his documents, determined to stay focused on the bigger picture. In less than 4 hours, he wouldn't just be a passenger on this airline, he would own it. But as more passengers boarded and settled in, the pattern of behavior from the crew became impossible to ignore. White executives received warm welcomes and immediate offers of pre-flight champagne. When the flight attendant reached Marcus, she walked right past without acknowledgement, then returned to passengers who had boarded after him. Just as he was about to speak up, a middle-aged white man rushed onto the plane, clearly the last two. Ard. The cabin door closed behind him, and the Legacy Airlines flight to San Francisco prepared for takeoff, carrying with it a CEO whose patience was beginning to wear thin. The distinct sound of champagne bottles popping echoed through the first-class cabin as Veronica Miller expertly served passengers seated in the premium section. Each white passenger received a flute of bubbling champagne with a warm smile and personalized greeting. Here you are, Mr. Davidson, your usual. Mrs. Reynolds, lovely to see you again. Yet when she reached Marcus Washington's seat, her smile vanished, and she moved past without a word. Marcus cleared his throat. Excuse me, could I get a drink as well? Veronica turned, her expression shifting to one of forced politeness. Of course, sir. What would you like? Champagne would be nice, like everyone else, Marcus replied evenly. I'll check if we have any left, she said before walking away. 5 minutes passed. 10. The plane had begun taxiing and still no drink appeared. Marcus observed as another flight attendant served the white businessman who had boarded last with champagne and a warm smile. From the galley, he overheard fragments of conversation. Must have used someone else's miles. Probably his first time in first class. The words weren't directed at him, but they were clearly about him. The chief purser, a trim man with graying temples whose name tag read Richard Bennett, approached Marcus's seat. Sir, I understand there was some confusion earlier about your seating assignment? There was no confusion on my part, Marcus replied. Another passenger incorrectly thought my seat was his. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, we like to make sure our first-class experience is comfortable for everyone. If you'd prefer a seat in our business class section, we'd be happy to accommodate that change. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. I'm quite comfortable here, thank you. Though I haven't received the pre-flight beverage that seems to be standard service. An oversight, I'm sure. We'll fix that right away, Richard said with a condescending tone that suggested it was anything but an oversight. Shortly after takeoff, the meal service began. Veronica moved through the cabin taking orders. Today we're offering pan-seared salmon with wild rice, or filet mignon with garlic mashed potatoes. When she reached Marcus, her demeanor chilled, noticeably. What would you like to eat, sir? The filet, please, medium rare. Veronica made a show of checking her cart. I'm sorry, we're out of the filet option. Marcus glanced across the aisle, where a white passenger had just been offered and selected the same meal. I couldn't help noticing you just served the same option to the gentleman across from me. That was the last one, she responded curtly. I see, Marcus said, discreetly activating the recording function on his phone. So to be clear, you served everyone else before me, and now my choices are limited. Sir, if you're going to be difficult, perhaps first class isn't the right fit for you, Veronica snapped, her professional veneer cracking. A white businessman seated nearby looked uncomfortable. I haven't ordered yet, he interjected. He can have my filet if that's what he wants. That's not necessary, Marcus said quietly. I just want to be treated with the same respect as everyone else in this cabin. Richard appeared again, seemingly materializing from thin air. Is there a problem here? Yes, Marcus stated firmly. I'm being denied meal options that are clearly still available to other passengers. Sir, our flight attendants have complete discretion over meal service. If Veronica says we're out of filet, Then we're out of filet for you, Richard said, emphasizing the last two words in a way that made their meaning clear. Marcus took a slow breath. I'm the CEO of Horizon Technologies. I fly over 100,000 miles per year. I've never been treated this way on any other airline. A flicker of concern crossed Richard's face, but he quickly recovered. Well, perhaps those other airlines have different standards. At Legacy, we have certain expectations of our premium passengers. The implication hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. As Richard walked away, Marcus noticed an Asian American woman watching the interaction with knowing eyes. She gave him a small nod of solidarity. Do you think Marcus should have confronted the discrimination more directly? Comment number 1 if you believe he should stand his ground, or number 2 if you think he should stay strategic for now. Don't forget to hit that like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination in customer service. What will Marcus do now that he's being openly disrespected on the very airline he's about to own? Subscribe to find out what happens next in this shocking story of power, prejudice, and ultimate justice. The salmon arrived at Marcus's seat looking noticeably smaller than portions served to other passengers. The rice was undercooked, the vegetables lukewarm. He looked at the plate, then back up at Veronica, who seemed to be waiting for a reaction. Is something wrong with your meal, sir? She asked with feigned concern. You know there is, Marcus replied calmly. This is not the standard first-class meal being served to other passengers. Veronica's smile tightened. I assure you, sir, all our meals meet Legacy Airlines' high standards. Marcus placed his napkin on the tray. I'd like to speak with the chief purser again. He's very busy with other passengers, she replied dismissively. I'll wait. 10 uncomfortable minutes passed before Richard appeared, his expression a mask of professional concern that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Washington, I understand you're unhappy with your meal. Unfortunately, we can't cook something different at 37,000 feet, Richard said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Marcus kept his voice measured. That's not the issue. The issue is that I'm receiving deliberately inferior service compared to every other passenger in this cabin. That's a very serious accusation, Richard replied, his tone hardening. It is, Marcus agreed, and I've been documenting every instance since boarding. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Richard's face. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our economy section, where the expectations are different. The suggestion hung in the air, an unmistakable attempt to humiliate him in front of the entire first-class cabin. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Asian American woman Marcus had noticed earlier looked up from her laptop, watching the scene unfold with increasing concern. I paid for first class, Marcus stated firmly. I expect first-class service. Richard leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. People like you should know your place. If you continue making a scene, I'll have the captain divert this flight. Marcus felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He'd experienced discrimination before, in boardrooms, at exclusive clubs, even at high-end stores, but rarely this blatant, this unapologetic. I'd like your employee number and full name, Marcus requested. Richard straightened up, smirking. Flight crews are protected by privacy regulations, for security reasons. The Asian American woman suddenly spoke up. That's not true. Crew members must identify themselves to passengers upon request. It's FAA regulation. Richard shot her a venomous look before turning back to Marcus. I'll bring you a comment card if you have concerns. As Richard walked away, the woman across the aisle leaned over. I'm Sandra Chang, executive at Pacific Investment Group. I've been watching what's happening. It's disgraceful. Marcus Washington, he replied, extending his hand. Thank you for speaking up. They do this all the time, she said quietly. I've flown Legacy for years. Their treatment of minority passengers is an open secret in corporate travel circles. Marcus was about to respond when his phone buzzed with a secure message. The final acquisition documents were ready for his electronic signature. In less than an hour, he would own 51% of Legacy Airlines. The timing felt almost poetic. He stood up, intending to use the first-class lavatory to review the documents privately. Immediately, Richard appeared in the aisle. Sir, The captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign due to expected turbulence. You need to return to your seat immediately. Marcus glanced around. Other passengers are up moving around. They're returning to their seats as instructed. Richard lied, even as a white passenger strolled past them toward the lavatory. Marcus sat back down, his patience wearing dangerously thin. He could see Sandra documenting the interaction on her phone, her camera discreetly angled toward them. A white passenger across the aisle who had been listening to the exchanges suddenly spoke up. "This is ridiculous. I've been flying first class for 20 years, and I've never seen service this poor or treatment this blatantly discriminatory." "Sir, this doesn't concern you," Richard responded coldly. "It absolutely does," the man countered. "My name is James Wilson, senior partner at Wilson Financial. I'll be filing a formal complaint about your conduct today." Richard's face flushed with anger. "The crew has complete authority on this aircraft. If you continue to be disruptive, there will be consequences." As if on cue, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "This is Captain Bryant speaking. We're experiencing some turbulence. All passengers and cabin crew, please return to your seats immediately and fasten your seatbelts." The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Marcus realized the crew was coordinating against him, using the full authority of the cockpit to shut down any opposition. As he fastened his seatbelt, he felt something he rarely experienced in his professional life: powerlessness. But it was temporary. Very temporary. What these discriminatory crew members didn't know was that in exactly 45 minutes, their entire professional reality would change forever. Marcus opened his secure email, ready to sign the final documents that would make him their boss. Sometimes justice came in unexpected forms. The fabricated turbulence announcement had its intended effect, silencing the confrontation and forcing everyone back to their seats. But it also created something the crew hadn't anticipated: conversation. As passengers remained buckled in with nothing to do but talk, the first-class cabin became a hive of whispered discussions about what they were witnessing. Sandra Chang leaned across the aisle when Richard retreated to the galley. "I've been recording everything," she whispered to Marcus. "This isn't just bad service, it's textbook discrimination." "I appreciate that," Marcus replied quietly. "Unfortunately, it's not an unfamiliar experience." Sandra nodded grimly. "Last month they made me verify my first-class ticket 3 times while white passengers walked right through. Then mysteriously lost my vegetarian meal request. When I complained, the purser suggested I might be on the wrong flight." From the row behind them, James Wilson joined the conversation. "I've flown over 2 million miles with Legacy, and I've noticed patterns. Their treatment of minority passengers has gotten worse over the past year. Some of my colleagues refuse to book with them anymore." Marcus absorbed this information, mentally adding it to the dossier of reasons this acquisition was necessary. His phone vibrated again, his executive team confirming that the final documents were ready for signature. The timing couldn't be more illuminating. Here he sat, experiencing firsthand the discriminatory culture he was about to inherit and change. From the galley, Richard watched them with narrowed eyes. He approached a young flight attendant trainee. "Emma, take over the mid-cabin service. I need to make a call to the cockpit about our situation." Emma Roberts, barely 3 weeks into her training, glanced nervously at Marcus and the others. "What situation, sir?" "Difficult passengers," Richard said dismissively. "Just keep an eye on 2A and his new friends. If they get up or cause any problems, let me know immediately." Emma nodded uncertainly and moved to follow orders, though her expression betrayed discomfort with the situation. As Richard disappeared toward the front of the aircraft, Marcus noticed Emma's hesitation. When she passed with a water pitcher, he smiled warmly. "First week on the job?" Emma looked startled that he'd noticed. "3rd week, actually. Still learning." "You're doing great," Marcus assured her. "This can't be what they taught you in training, though." Emma glanced nervously toward the galley. "No, sir, it's not," she admitted quietly before moving on. Sandra watched the interaction with interest. "Potential ally?" "Maybe," Marcus mused. "But she's in a vulnerable position. The industry culture protects senior crew members at all costs." His secure phone buzzed again with an encrypted message. Papers ready for final signature. Transaction completes upon landing. Marcus was contemplating his next move when he overheard Richard's voice from the galley, deliberately loud enough to carry. We've got a situation in first class. That passenger in 2A is becoming aggressive and disruptive. Sandra's eyes widened. They're setting you up. That's a code phrase for potential security threat. James leaned forward. They might try to have you removed at landing. I've seen it happen before. Marcus nodded grimly. I need to use the lavatory to handle some urgent business. If I don't return in 5 minutes, we'll know they've escalated, Sandra finished. Go, I'll keep recording. Marcus made his way to the first-class lavatory, only to find a handwritten out-of-order sign taped to the door. Richard appeared beside him almost instantly. I'm afraid you'll need to use the facilities. In the main cabin, he said with poorly concealed satisfaction. The lavatory was working perfectly an hour ago, Marcus observed. Mechanical issues can arise suddenly, Richard replied with a smirk. Safety first. As Marcus made his way through the premium economy section toward the main cabin, he noticed something disturbing. The service pattern changed dramatically the further back he went. Flight attendants who had been cold and formal in first class became outright dismissive with minority passengers in economy. Near the rear lavatory, he encountered a Nigerian passenger named Gabriel Okafor, who recognized him immediately. Mr. Washington, I follow your work at Horizon Technologies. What brings you to economy? Gabriel asked. Apparently, first class isn't as advertised, Marcus replied dryly. Gabriel nodded knowingly. Legacy is notorious among African business travelers. I've filed 3 formal complaints this year alone. They always disappear into their customer relations system, never to be addressed. How often do you fly with them? Marcus asked. Too often. They have a virtual monopoly on certain routes I need for business. But their crew members make it clear we're not welcome, especially that chief purser, Richard. He's been reported multiple times by various passengers. This confirmed what Marcus had suspected. The problem was systemic, not isolated. By the time he returned to first class, he found his seat had been disturbed. His laptop was closed. His documents shifted slightly from their original position. They went through your things, Sandra whispered. I recorded it. Richard claimed he was securing loose items during turbulence, but he was clearly looking at your screen before closing it. Marcus checked his security settings. The laptop had automatically locked after inactivity, protecting the acquisition documents. But the invasion of privacy was disturbing evidence of how far the crew was willing to go. Richard approached, again this time with Captain Bryant beside him. The captain's presence in the cabin mid-flight was unusual and concerning. Mr. Washington, the captain began formally, I understand there's been some disagreement with our service today. Before Marcus could respond, Richard interjected, Captain, this is the passenger I mentioned. He's been hostile since boarding, demanding special treatment and threatening our staff. That's absolutely false, James cut in. I've witnessed everything. Your crew has been discriminating against Mr. Washington systematically. The captain's expression hardened. Sir, I wasn't speaking to you. Flight crew reports are part of our official record. Then you should know your record will be false, Sandra added, holding up her phone. I've documented everything. Captain Bryant's face reddened. Recording crew members without consent is against airline policy. Documenting discrimination is my right as a passenger, Sandra countered. The standoff was interrupted by an announcement. This is your captain speaking. Due to a security situation, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Denver. Please remain in your seats with seatbelts fastened. The announcement sent a wave of murmurs through the cabin. Captain Bryant returned to the cockpit without another word, while Richard remained, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. Security situation? Marcus questioned. Standard protocol for disruptive passengers, Richard replied smoothly. An air marshal will evaluate the situation upon landing. As Richard walked away, Marcus realized the crew was attempting to have him removed from the flight based on fabricated security concerns, a serious escalation that could potentially affect his reputation and even his freedom. The aircraft began its descent toward Denver. Marcus's phone buzzed once more, the final call to sign the acquisition documents before landing. As the plane tilted downward, Marcus made his decision. This wasn't just about one bad flight experience anymore. It was about exposing and changing a culture of discrimination that had gone unchecked for too long. What these crew members didn't realize was that their actions weren't just costing them a customer, they were costing them their jobs. The plane descended rapidly toward Denver International Airport, the cabin eerily quiet as passengers processed the announcement about a security situation. Marcus Washington remained outwardly calm, though his mind raced with strategies. The crew succeeded in having him removed as a security threat. It could create complications with the acquisition finalization. As the plane leveled out for its approach, a uniformed air marshal made his way to the first-class cabin. Richard immediately approached him, pointing discreetly toward Marcus. "That's him in 2A," Richard whispered, though loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "He's been aggressive and threatening since takeoff." The air marshal, a stern-faced man with a military bearing, approached Marcus's seat. "Sir, I'm Air Marshal Jordan Stevens. I need to speak with you about some concerns raised by the flight crew." Marcus nodded calmly. "Of course." "Could you describe your interactions with the crew today?" Jordan asked, his expression neutral but watchful. Before Marcus could answer, Richard interjected. "He demanded special treatment, became hostile when meal options were limited, and has been disruptive throughout the flight." "I'm asking the passenger, not you," Jordan said firmly to Richard, whose smug expression faltered. Turning back to Marcus, the air marshal continued. "Please go ahead, sir. Since boarding, I've experienced a pattern of discriminatory treatment," Marcus explained calmly. "I was questioned about my seating assignment, skipped during beverage service, denied the meal choice that was available to other passengers, and just now found my personal belongings had been searched while I was away from my seat." Sandra leaned forward. "I've documented everything, including the crew searching his belongings without permission." Jordan glanced at her. "And you are?" "Sandra Chang, executive at Pacific Investment Group. I witnessed the entire situation." James Wilson spoke up as well. "I can corroborate their account. The crew's behavior has been appalling." The air marshal's expression remained professional, but Marcus could see a flicker of realization in his eyes. This wasn't the simple, disruptive passenger scenario he'd been told to expect. "Mr. Washington, do you have any record of these interactions?" Jordan asked. Marcus nodded. "I've been documenting everything discreetly." Richard's face darkened as he realized his plan was backfiring. "Captain Bryant has authority over this aircraft, and he's determined this passenger is a security risk." "That determination seems premature based on what I'm hearing," Jordan replied. He turned to Marcus. "Sir, I need to confirm. Have you at any point threatened or become physically aggressive with the crew?" "Absolutely not," Marcus answered firmly. The air marshal nodded. "In that case, there's no immediate security concern. We'll continue this discussion after landing." He turned to Richard. "The captain should be informed there's no need for security intervention at this time." Richard's face flushed with anger as he stormed toward the cockpit. Moments later, Captain Bryant's voice came over the intercom. "This is your captain speaking. Our unscheduled stop has been canceled. We will continue to our original destination of San Francisco. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The announcement sparked murmurs throughout the cabin. Jordan gave Marcus a slight nod before returning to his seat at the rear of first class, his presence now a deterrent against further escalation from the crew. Emma, the trainee flight attendant, approached with a fresh glass of water for Marcus. "I'm sorry about all this," she whispered quickly before moving on. As the plane regained altitude, Marcus decided to use the relative calm to visit the economy restroom again, this time with a different purpose. Walking through the main cabin, he observed more closely how the crew interacted with passengers of different backgrounds. The pattern was unmistakable and disturbing. Near the rear galley, he encountered Gabriel Okafor again. "Still experiencing the Legacy Airlines special treatment?" Gabriel asked wryly. "It's worse than I imagined," Marcus admitted. "How long has this been going on?" Years, Gabriel replied. But it's gotten more blatant recently. There was a change in management about 18 months ago. Since then, several senior crew members known for their inclusivity have mysteriously been reassigned or pushed out. Do you know who was behind those changes? Marcus asked. Word is it came from someone high up, executive level. Gabriel lowered his voice. There's a rumor that Captain Bryant is related to someone on the board of directors. He's untouchable, which is why he and his favorite crew members like Richard can get away with this behavior. This information added a disturbing new dimension to the situation. The discrimination wasn't just from individual crew members. It appeared to be tacitly approved or even encouraged by leadership. Thank you for sharing this, Marcus said. It might be more important than you know. When Marcus returned to first class, he found his seat area had been disturbed again. More blatantly this time. His laptop was open, the screen showing a password entry field with multiple failed attempts. They tried to access your computer while you were gone, Sandra whispered urgently. Richard claimed he needed to secure loose items during turbulence, again, but he was clearly trying to get into your files. James Wilson chimed in. I challenged him, and he threatened to have me removed at landing too. Marcus checked his secure phone. The acquisition documents were still awaiting his final signature. The attempted breach of his privacy was the last straw. He took his seat just as Richard approached again, this time with an accusatory glare. Sir, a passenger has reported a laptop missing. Would you mind if we check your bag? The implication was clear and outrageous. Now they were trying to frame him for theft. Actually, I would mind, Marcus replied coolly. Especially since you've already searched my belongings twice without permission. Richard's eyes widened in feigned innocence. That's a serious accusation. Perhaps you misunderstood routine cabin service. Sandra held up her phone. I have it all recorded. You searched his bag and attempted to access his laptop both times. He left his seat. Richard's facade cracked slightly. Recording crew members is against airline policy. I'll need to confiscate that phone. That's not happening, Sandra replied firmly. The standoff was interrupted by Captain Bryant's voice. Again, this is your captain speaking. Due to ongoing disruptions in the cabin, we will be landing in Reno, where law enforcement will board the aircraft. All passengers are required to remain seated until authorities arrive. The situation had escalated beyond reason, Marcus realized. The crew was willing to divert an entire flight and inconvenience all passengers, rather than acknowledge their discriminatory behavior. It was time to make the call that would change everything. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their authority like these flight crew members? Comment number 1, if you've experienced or seen similar discrimination, or number 2, if you've witnessed someone stand up against it. Don't forget to like this video if you believe accountability matters regardless of someone's position. What do you think will happen when Marcus finally reveals who he truly is? Will the crew face consequences for their actions, or will they find a way to escape justice? Subscribe now to find out in the next part of this shocking true story. The atmosphere in the cabin grew tense as the aircraft began its unexpected descent toward Reno. Air Marshal Jordan Stevens looked increasingly concerned as he observed the situation unfolding. After a brief radio conversation with someone, he approached Marcus's seat again. Mr. Washington, I need to understand exactly what's happening here, he said quietly. This situation has escalated beyond what seems reasonable for a service complaint. I agree completely, Marcus replied. The crew has systematically discriminated against me since boarding, then escalated to invading my privacy, and now appears to be attempting to frame me for theft. Sandra offered her phone. I have video evidence of everything. Jordan reviewed the footage, his expression darkening. This is concerning, but I'm bound by protocols. When the captain reports a security situation, I have to investigate. He lowered his voice. However, I'm also required to be objective and consider all evidence. Richard appeared beside them, his posture rigid with authority. Marshal Stevens, we'll be landing in 10 minutes. Local police have been notified of a level 2 security situation. On what grounds? Jordan questioned sharply. Threatening behavior, potential theft, and disruption of flight operations, Richard replied smoothly. Captain Bryant has the final authority on this aircraft, and he's determined this passenger poses a risk to flight safety. Jordan's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing his skepticism. I'll need to speak with the captain before we land. He's busy with landing preparations, Richard countered. The decision has been made. As Richard walked away, Jordan turned to Marcus. Sir, I don't like what I'm seeing here, but my hands are partially tied by protocol. When we land, stay calm and let me handle the initial interaction with local authorities. Marcus nodded appreciatively. Thank you for your fairness. As the plane descended, Captain Bryant made another announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be on the ground in Reno shortly. All passengers are required to remain seated while authorities board to address a security situation. We apologize for any inconvenience. The announcement sent a ripple of concern through the cabin. Several passengers looked toward Marcus with expressions ranging from confusion to support. The air marshal returned to his seat, communicating quietly into his radio. Marcus used these final minutes before landing to check his secure messages. An urgent text from his executive team read, "Acquisition papers require immediate signature. Transfer of ownership must finalize before market open tomorrow." The timing couldn't be worse, or perhaps more perfect. As the plane touched down in Reno, Marcus made a decision. He quietly slipped into the first-class lavatory, which had mysteriously become functional again once the air marshal was involved. Inside, he quickly signed the digital acquisition documents using his secure authentication key, then sent a message to his executive team. Executed. Effective immediately. When he emerged, Richard was waiting with a triumphant expression. Police are boarding now. You'll need to gather your belongings. Marcus smiled calmly. Thank you for your concern. The aircraft door opened, and 2 Reno police officers boarded, followed by what appeared to be airport security. Captain Bryant emerged from the cockpit, his uniform crisp and authoritative as he greeted the officers. Officers, thank you for your prompt response. We have a disruptive passenger who has been threatening my crew and interfering with flight operations. Air Marshal Stevens immediately approached. Officers, I'm Federal Air Marshal Jordan Stevens. I've been monitoring this situation directly, and I have concerns about these claims. One officer, a sergeant based on his insignia, looked between them. What exactly is the alleged offense? Richard stepped forward. This passenger, he pointed at Marcus, has been aggressive, made demands for special treatment, and we suspect he may have taken items belonging to another passenger. That's categorically false, Sandra interjected, standing despite the order to remain seated. I've documented the entire incident. This man has been subjected to blatant discrimination by your crew. James Wilson stood as well. I can corroborate that statement. I've never witnessed such unprofessional conduct in 30 years of flying. Captain Bryant's face hardened. Officers, these individuals are associates of the disruptive passenger. They've been interfering with our crew's duties throughout the flight. The police sergeant looked increasingly confused. Sir, he addressed Marcus directly. Could you explain your side of this situation? Before Marcus could answer, Richard interrupted. He's been making false accusations of discrimination to cover his disruptive behavior. I wasn't asking you, the sergeant said firmly to Richard, then turned back to Marcus. Sir? Marcus remained remarkably composed. Since boarding, I've experienced a pattern of discriminatory treatment from this crew. When I politely requested equal service, they escalated the situation, searched my belongings without permission, attempted to access my laptop, and are now trying to have me removed based on false accusations. He's lying, Captain Bryant snapped. This is a security matter, and I have full authority over this aircraft. The sergeant looked uncomfortable with the conflicting accounts. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the terminal. Marcus's phone rang with a distinctive tone he recognized immediately. I apologize, but I need to take this call. It's quite urgent. He stepped slightly away and answered, Mr. Washington, this is Diane from Legal. The acquisition is complete. You are now the majority owner of Legacy Airlines, effective immediately. The board has been notified, and emergency protocols have been activated as per the terms of the agreement. Thank you, Diane. Please proceed as planned. I'll be in touch shortly. Marcus ended the call and turned back to the increasingly confused group. What acquisition? Captain Bryant demanded, having overheard part of the conversation. Marcus smiled calmly. Gentlemen, there's been a significant development that affects this situation. Captain Bryant, could I see you privately for a moment? The captain's face reddened. Absolutely not. Officers, please remove this passenger from my aircraft. It's not your aircraft anymore, Marcus said quietly, yet his voice carried through the hushed cabin. As of 3 minutes ago, I am the majority owner of Legacy Airlines. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard's face drained of color. Captain Bryant stared in disbelief. That's impossible, the captain finally sputtered. Marcus held up his phone, displaying the confirmation documents. I've been in negotiations to acquire controlling interest in Legacy Airlines for months. The deal finalized during this flight. The police sergeant looked bewildered. So you're Marcus Washington, CEO of Horizon Technologies and now majority owner of Legacy Airlines, Marcus confirmed. And I've just experienced firsthand why this acquisition was so necessary. Richard took an involuntary step backward. This is some kind of trick. At that moment, Marcus's phone rang again. He answered on speaker. Mr. Washington, this is Chairman Davis of the Legacy Airlines board. We've just received notification of the ownership transfer. The board is assembled for an emergency session as requested. We're awaiting your instructions. The cabin erupted in astonished murmurs. Captain Bryant's authoritative posture crumbled visibly as the reality of the situation dawned on him. The police sergeant cleared his throat. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. Do you wish to press charges, Mr. Washington? Marcus considered the question carefully. Not at this time, but I do request that this aircraft continue to its intended destination with a different flight crew if possible. That can be arranged, came the voice from his phone. Chairman Davis had been listening. We have standby crew members at Reno who can take over immediately. Thank you, Chairman. Please also inform all relevant authorities that there never was a security situation on this flight. The passengers have been inconvenienced enough. As Marcus ended the call, the expressions on the faces of Richard and Captain Bryant shifted, from shock to fear, as they realized their careers now rested in the hands of the very man they had spent the past several hours discriminating against. The world they had controlled so confidently just moments ago had completely transformed beneath their feet. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Airport operations managers arrived at the aircraft, followed by Legacy Airlines regional executives who had been hastily summoned. The confusion on their faces turned to shock as they were briefed on the situation. Marcus Washington, the passenger who had been subjected to blatant discrimination, was now their boss. While the replacement crew prepared to take over the flight, Marcus requested use of a private room in the Reno airport. There, he convened an impromptu meeting with Chairman Davis via video conference, with Sandra Chang and James Wilson invited to attend as witnesses. I've been monitoring the acquisition progress for months, Chairman Davis explained to the assembled group. But the timing of your experience today is unfortunate coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, Chairman, Marcus replied. What I experienced today appears to be systemic, not isolated. I can confirm that, Sandra added. As a frequent flyer with Legacy, I've witnessed similar treatment of minority passengers on multiple occasions. Chairman Davis looked genuinely disturbed. We've had complaints, of course, but nothing that indicated a pattern this severe. Perhaps because those complaints were intercepted, Marcus suggested. I've learned that Captain Bryant may have connections that have protected him and his preferred crew from consequences. The chairman's expression darkened. We'll investigate thoroughly. In the meantime, what would you like to do about today's situation? Marcus considered carefully. The original crew should be suspended pending investigation, but I want this handled through proper channels. No shortcuts. And the continuing flight to San Francisco? I'll be on it, Marcus confirmed. I want to see how the airline operates when the crew doesn't know who's watching. As they prepared to return to the aircraft, Marcus pulled Sandra aside. "Thank you for your support today. You put yourself at risk to stand up for what's right." Sandra smiled. "Justice needs witnesses. Besides, I've experienced enough discrimination in my career to recognize it instantly." The passengers had been updated that the flight would continue to San Francisco with a new crew due to an operational issue. As Marcus returned to his seat, he noticed a new charge on the digital display in the seat back: $3,000 for premium amenities. "I didn't order this," he told the new purser, a professional woman named Heather. She checked the system with concern. "The charge was added manually by Chief Purser Bennett about 20 minutes ago." She looked up with alarm. "I'll remove it immediately, sir." "Please don't," Marcus replied. "I want it documented exactly as is." James Wilson leaned over from his new seat beside Marcus. "They tried to add fraudulent charges to your account. That's criminal." "They're building quite a case against themselves," Marcus agreed quietly. As the flight resumed toward San Francisco, Marcus used the time to review the evidence collected. Sandra's videos, his own recordings, statements from Gabriel and other passengers, the unauthorized access attempts on his laptop, and now fraudulent charges. The pattern was undeniable and disturbing. His secure phone buzzed with updates from his executive team. The news of his acquisition had been contained for now, but would become public when markets opened the next morning. He had approximately 12 hours to prepare his response to what had happened today, not just as a wronged passenger, but as the new owner with power to create real change. The replacement crew operated with professional courtesy that showed exactly how service should be delivered, respectfully and equally to all passengers, regardless of appearance or background. The contrast with his earlier experience couldn't have been more stark. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Marcus prepared for what would come next. His original plan had been to quietly restructure the airline's leadership over several months. Today's events had accelerated that timeline dramatically. "What will you do with them?" Sandra asked quietly. "Justice isn't about revenge," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "It's about accountability and change. The airline doesn't need a purge, it needs transformation." The new captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach into San Francisco. On behalf of Legacy Airlines, we sincerely apologize for today's delays and thank you for your patience." As the plane touched down in San Francisco, Marcus made one more call. "Diane, I need the board assembled in person at headquarters in 1 hour. And please contact our PR team. We're going to need them." The plane taxied to the gate, but as passengers prepared to deplane, an unexpected announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay, but we've been instructed that all passengers are to remain seated temporarily. We'll update you momentarily." Marcus looked up in surprise. This wasn't part of his instructions. Through the windows, he could see police vehicles and what appeared to be airline security converging on the jet bridge. Sandra looked concerned. "What's happening?" Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang with Chairman Davis on the line. "Mr. Washington, I should warn you. Captain Bryant made some calls before being suspended. He's claiming you used fraudulent means to acquire the airline and has convinced airport police to detain you for questioning upon arrival." Marcus felt a surge of disbelief. "He's trying to have me arrested?" "It appears so. He has connections with the airport authority through his family. I'm working to clear this up, but there may be some unpleasantness when you deplane." The captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Mr. Marcus Washington, please identify yourself to the flight attendant. Airport security needs to speak with you upon arrival." The final power play was unfolding. Even in defeat, those who had discriminated against him were trying to use the system one last time to humiliate and control him, but they had miscalculated badly. "Chairman," Marcus said calmly into the phone, "please have our corporate counsel meet me at the gate and contact the FBI field office in San Francisco. Filing a false report to law enforcement is a federal offense." As he ended the call, Marcus noticed the concerned faces of passengers around him. They had witnessed his mistreatment throughout the journey, and now they were about to witness its culmination. What the crew never understood was that, Power without accountability always eventually fails. The cabin door opened and the moment of truth had arrived. The jet bridge connected with a soft thump, and tension filled the cabin as uniformed officers appeared at the aircraft door. Marcus Washington sat calmly in seat 2A, watching as confusion played across the faces of the security personnel. Clearly, they had expected to board, identify a troublemaker, and swiftly remove him. Instead, they were met by a phalanx of suits, Legacy Airlines executives who had rushed to the gate upon hearing of Captain Bryant's last desperate maneuver. "Where is Marcus Washington?" one officer asked, scanning the first-class cabin. Before anyone could respond, a distinguished older man in an impeccable suit stepped forward. "I'm Gregory Parker, General Counsel for Legacy Airlines. There seems to be a serious misunderstanding. Mr. Washington is not only our valued passenger, but as of approximately 90 minutes ago, he is the majority owner of this airline." The officers exchanged bewildered glances. "We have reports of a disruptive passenger who allegedly committed fraud." "Those allegations," Parker interrupted firmly, "are themselves fraudulent, made by a suspended employee currently under investigation for discrimination and misconduct. We have extensive documentation and multiple witnesses." He gestured toward Sandra and James, who had both stood to show their support. Marcus finally rose from his seat. "Officers, I understand you're doing your job. I'm Marcus Washington, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I believe you've been misled as part of a retaliatory action." The lead officer, a veteran sergeant who clearly recognized a rapidly deteriorating situation, nodded slowly. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in the terminal, sir." "Of course," Marcus agreed. "But first, I'd like all passengers to deplane normally. They've been inconvenienced enough today." As passengers filed past, many nodded respectfully to Marcus. Some whispered words of support or shared their own observations of the discriminatory treatment they'd witnessed. Gabriel Okafor stopped briefly, business card in hand. "Mr. Washington, what happened today wasn't isolated. I have documentation of similar incidents on legacy flights going back 18 months. If it would help your investigation." Marcus accepted the card gratefully. "It would help enormously, thank you." As the last passengers deplaned, a commotion erupted at the end of the jet bridge. Richard Bennett and Captain Bryant had arrived, apparently expecting to witness Marcus being led away in handcuffs. Instead, they found themselves face to face with their new employer and a growing contingent of airline executives. "This is absurd," Captain Bryant sputtered upon seeing Marcus standing freely among the executives. "This man disrupted my flight and endangered passengers." Marcus stepped forward calmly. The only danger on that flight was the discriminatory treatment that nearly caused a riot among witnesses. "You have no proof of that," Richard snapped, though his confidence was clearly wavering. Sandra Chang raised her phone. "Actually, we have extensive video documentation of everything that happened." One of the officers, who had been quietly reviewing information on his tablet, looked up with newfound understanding. "Captain Bryant, we received your report alleging fraud and security threats, but our verification shows Mr. Washington is indeed the new majority shareholder of Legacy Airlines through a legitimate acquisition that's been in progress for months." The captain's face drained of color. That can't be right." Chairman Davis, who had arrived during the exchange, spoke with quiet authority. "The board approved this acquisition unanimously, Captain. It was finalized today while Mr. Washington was experiencing discriminatory treatment on your aircraft." The realization of their situation finally seemed to dawn on Richard and Captain Bryant. The man they had targeted, humiliated, and attempted to have arrested was now effectively their boss. "This is a setup," Richard declared desperately. "He deliberately flew on our aircraft to create this situation." Marcus shook his head. "I booked this flight because my regular one was canceled. I had no intention of revealing my connection to the acquisition until after it was complete. Your actions forced my hand." The airport police sergeant cleared his throat. "Based on what we're seeing, there was no legitimate reason for our response. However," he added, looking pointedly at Captain Bryant, "filing a false police report is a serious offense." "I want to press charges," Marcus stated firmly. surprising everyone. Not for myself, but because using law enforcement as a weapon against passengers of color is dangerous and unacceptable. Captain Bryant's expression shifted from defiance to fear. You can't do this. My family has connections throughout this industry. My brother-in-law sits on the board. Sat on the board, Chairman Davis corrected quietly. His resignation was the first I accepted after learning of today's events. The terminal had grown unusually quiet, with travelers and airport staff watching the confrontation unfold. Camera phones had appeared, capturing the moment when accountability finally caught up with those who had abused their authority. "You're all fired," Richard announced desperately, looking at the executives, standing with Marcus. "Captain Bryant is still in command of flight operations, and You have no authority here, Parker," the general counsel interrupted calmly. "Both of you were suspended the moment we received reports of today's incidents. That suspension is now a termination, effective immediately." Security officers, airline security, not airport police, approached to escort the former crew members away. Captain Bryant made one last attempt to salvage his position. "The union will fight this. You can't fire us over one passenger's complaints." "It wasn't just one," said a quiet voice. Emma Roberts, the trainee flight attendant, stepped forward from where she had been waiting silently. "I've documented every discriminatory incident I've witnessed during my training. There are dozens, sir, all reported, all ignored." As Richard and Captain Bryant were led away, Marcus turned to Emma with newfound respect. "That took courage." She shook her head. "It shouldn't have to. I became a flight attendant to help people, not to participate in discrimination." The confrontation had attracted a small crowd of onlookers, some filming with their phones. What had begun as a private incident was rapidly becoming public, with potential ramifications throughout the industry. Chairman Davis pulled Marcus aside. "The board is assembled and waiting. How would you like to proceed?" Marcus looked around at the gathered witnesses, passengers who had experienced or observed discrimination, crew members brave enough to speak out, executives now facing a reckoning for the culture they had allowed to flourish. "This ends today," he said with quiet determination. "Not just for these crew members, but for the entire culture that protected them." As they prepared to depart for the emergency board meeting, Marcus noticed the airport police sergeant approaching one last time. "Mr. Washington, we'll need formal statements regarding the false report." "You'll have them," Marcus assured him, "along with all evidence we've gathered today." The sergeant nodded, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, sir, what happened to you today happens more often than people realize, usually without the same ending." "I know," Marcus replied soberly. "That's exactly why things need to change." As they walked through the terminal toward the waiting cars, Sandra fell into step beside Marcus. "You've experienced the worst of this airline today. Are you sure you still want to own it?" Marcus smiled grimly. "More than ever. Sometimes to fix a broken system, you need to own it first." Have you ever witnessed justice served in real time like this? Comment number 1 if you believe Marcus handled the situation perfectly, or number 2 if you think he should have taken different actions. Don't forget to hit that like button if you've been waiting for the crew to get what they deserved. What will happen at the board meeting? Will Legacy Airlines be transformed, or will the remaining leadership resist Marcus's vision for change? Subscribe now to find out in the next installment of this incredible story. The Legacy Airlines headquarters buzzed with nervous energy as Marcus Washington strode through the main lobby. Employees stopped mid-conversation, recognizing the man whose face had already begun circulating on social media. Within hours of landing, clips of the confrontation at the gate had gone viral, along with passenger testimonials about the discriminatory treatment they'd witnessed. The executive conference room fell silent as Marcus entered, flanked by Sandra Chang and James Wilson. Chairman Davis stood at the head of an imposing mahogany table surrounded by board members and senior executives, their expressions ranging from concerned to outright fearful. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chairman Davis began, "most of you are aware of today's events. For those who aren't, Mr. Washington, our new majority shareholder, experienced reprehensible treatment on one of our flights today. Before we proceed, I believe he should share that experience directly." Marcus stepped forward. Thank you, Chairman. I didn't plan to introduce myself to this company under these circumstances. My intention was to quietly acquire control and implement changes gradually. Today's events have made that impossible. He recounted the discrimination he'd experienced, from boarding to the false police report, in calm, measured tones that made the narrative all the more damning. When he finished, the room remained uncomfortably silent. This can't possibly be representative of our airline, protested a silver-haired executive. Captain Bryant has been with us for 25 years. This must be a misunderstanding. Sandra, Chang stood. There's no misunderstanding. I documented everything. She placed her phone on the table. Would you like to see the videos of your crew members searching Mr. Washington's belongings without permission? Or perhaps the audio of them making racist remarks when they thought no one was listening? The executive blanched. That won't be necessary. I disagree, Marcus countered. It's absolutely necessary. He nodded to Sandra, who connected her phone to the room's display system. The videos played in sequence: the denied meal service, the discriminatory treatment, Richard's invasive searches of Marcus's belongings, and the damning audio of crew members mocking Marcus in the galley. With each clip, the room grew more silent, the executives more ashen-faced. This is one flight, Marcus stated after the final video ended. But I've already received dozens of messages from passengers sharing similar experiences. This isn't isolated, it's systemic. A notification chimed on multiple phones simultaneously. An executive glanced at his screen and swallowed hard. CNN is reporting on the incident. They're calling it "Flying While Black Tech Billionaire Exposes Airline Discrimination." Another board member checked her phone. Our stock is dropping in after-hours trading. This could be catastrophic for the quarter. Your concerns about quarterly earnings are noted, Marcus replied dryly. But perhaps we should focus on the human cost of the discriminatory culture that's been allowed to flourish here. The doors burst open as a flustered man in an ill-fitting suit rushed in. I demand to be included in this meeting. I'm Union Representative Douglas Miller, and you cannot terminate flight crew without proper procedure. Chairman Davis looked annoyed. Mr. Miller, this is a closed board meeting. It's all right, Marcus interrupted. He should hear this too. He turned to the union representative. Mr. Miller, are you aware that Captain Bryant and Chief Purser Bennett attempted to have me arrested based on false allegations after discriminating against me throughout the flight? Miller faltered slightly. I've heard certain allegations, but crew members have rights to due process. As do passengers, Marcus countered. Tell me, how many discrimination complaints has your union received about legacy flight crews in the past year? The union rep shifted uncomfortably. That information is confidential. 217, Marcus stated flatly. I had my team pull the public records during my drive here. 217 formal complaints, systematically buried between your union's protection and the airline's indifference. Miller's face reddened. Those complaints weren't substantiated because they were never properly investigated, Marcus finished for him. That ends today. A notification sounded on Marcus's phone. He checked it briefly, then looked up with renewed determination. Captain Bryant has just given an interview to a local news station, claiming I played the race card to take over the airline and fire him unjustly. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. A PR executive spoke up urgently. We need to release a statement immediately to control the narrative. No, Marcus said firmly. No more controlled narratives. No more burying the truth. He turned to address the entire room. Legacy Airlines has a cancer, and it's spread throughout your organization. The treatment won't be comfortable, but it's necessary for survival. Sandra's phone buzzed. She checked it, then looked up with wide eyes. You need to see this. She connected her phone to the display again, this time showing a breaking news report. On screen, a reporter stood in front of the airport. We've just obtained exclusive security footage that appears to contradict Captain Bryant's claims. This video, provided by an anonymous source within airport security, shows Legacy Airlines crew members deliberately targeting minority passengers for additional scrutiny and reduced service. The footage played, showing incidents from multiple flights, all with the same pattern of discrimination, all involving Captain Bryant's preferred crew. Marcus watched the board members' faces as they witnessed irrefutable evidence that the problem extended far beyond today's flight. "Who released that footage?" demanded a board member. "That's proprietary airport security material. The more important question," Marcus replied, "is why your airline needed external security footage to expose what's been happening on your planes every day." The union representative had grown pale. "These are serious allegations that require thorough investigation." "I agree completely," Marcus cut in, "which is why I've already engaged an independent civil rights auditor to review all complaints and policies, effective immediately." He turned to the board. "This isn't a negotiation. This is me informing you of decisions already made." The realization of just how thoroughly the power dynamic had shifted finally seemed to settle over the room. These executives were no longer in control of the narrative or the company. The truth they had ignored for so long was now displayed, on screens across the country, with their new owner determined to address it head-on. "What exactly do you want from us?" asked the chairman finally. Marcus's expression was resolute. "Accountability, transformation, and the courage to admit that what happened today wasn't an anomaly. It was the inevitable result of the culture you've allowed to thrive." As if on cue, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Marcus answered and listened briefly, his expression darkening. "Thank you for the information. Please send everything to my legal team immediately." He ended the call and addressed the room once more. That was a former Legacy employee who was terminated last year after reporting discriminatory practices by Captain Bryant and others. She has copies of deleted emails showing that complaints were systematically buried on orders from senior management. He looked pointedly at several executives who suddenly seemed unable to meet his gaze. The truth was finally coming to light, and for those who had enabled discrimination through action or inaction, there would be nowhere left to hide. Dawn broke over San Francisco as Marcus Washington stood at his hotel window, watching the early morning news coverage of yesterday's events. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the confrontation at the airport. The story had exploded overnight, with Gar Legacy Airlines and Flying While Black trending across social platforms. A knock at the door announced Sandra Chang's arrival for their planned breakfast meeting. "Have you seen this?" she asked without preamble, handing him her tablet. The screen displayed an open letter from the Airline Pilots Association, denouncing what they called a rush to judgment and demanding due process for Captain Bryant. The statement carefully avoided addressing the actual discrimination, instead focusing on procedural concerns about the captain's termination. "They're circling the wagons," Marcus observed. Sandra nodded grimly. "And that's not all. 3 board members have called emergency meetings with major shareholders, trying to challenge your acquisition on technical grounds. This wasn't unexpected. Systems of privilege rarely surrendered without a fight." Marcus had anticipated resistance, though perhaps not quite so quickly or coordinated. His phone rang, Chairman Davis calling with news. "Mr. Washington, Captain Bryant's brother-in-law has filed for an emergency injunction claiming the acquisition violates certain covenants in the company charter. It's baseless, but it could tie things up in court." "Let them try," Marcus replied calmly. "Meanwhile, proceed with the independent investigation as planned." As they prepared to leave for the follow-up board meeting, Marcus's security detail reported a concerning development. A small but vocal protest had formed outside Legacy headquarters, with participants holding signs reading, "Stop the hostile takeover" and "Save our airline." "Interesting timing," Sandra remarked. Almost as if it was organized overnight by someone with a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. When they arrived at headquarters, they found the executive floor in chaos. Media requests had overwhelmed the PR department, employee forums were flooded with questions, and customer service lines were jammed with passengers either canceling future bookings or calling to report their own experiences of discrimination. The boardroom was notably less full than the previous day. Several executives had called in sick, clearly avoiding involvement in the growing controversy. Chairman Davis looked haggard as he called the meeting to order. We face significant challenges today. The pilots' union is threatening a sympathy strike if Captain Bryant isn't reinstated pending proper investigation. 4 major shareholders have expressed concerns about the acquisition process, and our stock has dropped 12% since markets opened. Marcus listened calmly, noting which executives seemed concerned about justice and which were only worried about stock prices. "There's more," continued the chairman. "Captain Bryant has given another interview claiming he's being scapegoated. He's suggesting that if there was any discrimination, it came from policies set by management, not from crew members following protocol." "He's not entirely wrong," Marcus observed, surprising everyone. "Individual discriminatory actions flourish in environments that enable them. The crew bears responsibility for their behavior, but so does every person in this room who ignored complaints or prioritized profits over dignity." A senior operations executive named Lawrence Phillips spoke up defensively. "With all due respect, Mr. Washington, you've been part of this company for less than 24 hours. Some of us have dedicated decades to legacy airlines. The implication that we've fostered discrimination is deeply offensive. More offensive than the actual discrimination experienced by your passengers?" Sandra countered. Phillips bristled. "Isolated incidents. 217 formal complaints in 12 months isn't isolated," Marcus interrupted, "and those are just the passengers who took the time to document their experiences." The tension in the room was palpable when Marcus's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His expression darkened as he read it. "It seems Captain Bryant's connections run deeper than we thought," he announced. "My security team just informed me that personal information about my family has been posted online, along with our home address and threatening messages." Gasps echoed around the table. Even Lawrence Phillips looked genuinely disturbed. "That's unacceptable regardless of the circumstances." "Yes, it is," Marcus agreed. "Just as unacceptable as using airport police to try to have me arrested. Just as unacceptable as denying service based on skin color. Just as unacceptable as every indignity, large and small, that passengers have endured on your airline." The parallelism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. For perhaps the first time, some of the executives began to understand the gravity of what had been happening under their watch. The meeting was interrupted by Parker, the general counsel, who entered with a concerned expression. "We have a situation. Captain Bryant and Richard Bennett have called a press conference at the airport Marriott. They're about to go live with what they're calling the real story behind yesterday's events." Marcus checked his watch. "Let them. The truth isn't afraid of lies." As if on cue, an assistant rushed in with a tablet displaying the beginning of the press conference. Captain Bryant stood at a podium, his uniform crisp despite his suspended status, projecting authority as he spoke. "Yesterday, a powerful billionaire used his wealth and influence to take over our beloved airline and fire dedicated employees without due process. This isn't about discrimination. It's about corporate raiders using social issues as cover for financial gain." Richard Bennett stood beside him, nodding solemnly. Several other crew members lined up behind them in a show of solidarity. "They're reframing the narrative," Sandra observed, "making themselves the victims." Marcus watched thoughtfully. "They've had years of practice making others feel powerless. It's the only playbook they know." As the press conference continued, Captain Bryant made an unexpected announcement. "We've filed a formal complaint with the FAA alleging that Mr. Washington interfered with flight crew duties, a federal offense. We've also submitted evidence that he deliberately provoked confrontation as part of his takeover strategy." Parker, the general counsel, looked alarmed. "That's a serious allegation. Federal charges could complicate your position significantly." Marcus remained composed. "They're desperate, and desperation leads to mistakes." He turned to an assistant. "Please contact the FBI agents who took statements yesterday. Tell them we have evidence of Captain Bryant and Richard Bennett coordinating false federal complaints." The press conference took another turn as a reporter asked about the video. Evidence of discrimination. Captain Bryant dismissed it as selectively edited and taken out of context. Then came the moment that changed everything. A young flight attendant stepped forward to the microphone. Emma Roberts, the trainee who had showed empathy during the flight. I was supposed to stand here today and support Captain Bryant, she began nervously. I was told my job depended on it. But I can't lie about what I've witnessed. Her voice gained strength as she continued. The discrimination I've seen isn't isolated. It's systematic. It's taught to new crew members as unwritten policy. And when I've reported it, my concerns were dismissed or I was reassigned to different crews. The camera caught Captain Bryant's expression of shock and betrayal as Emma continued revealing the inner workings of the discriminatory culture. Richard tried to pull her away from the microphone, but she stood her ground. Back in the boardroom, the executives watched in stunned silence as the narrative they'd tried to control crumbled in real time. That, Marcus said quietly, is what courage looks like. His phone buzzed with a message from his investigative team. Server access secured. Found deleted security footage from multiple flights. Discrimination pattern confirmed with timestamp authentication. Marcus looked up at the executives, some now visibly sweating. It seems your computer system had quite a lot of deleted evidence that wasn't quite as deleted as someone hoped. The system that had protected discrimination for so long was beginning to crumble. But the fight was far from over. The boardroom had transformed into a command center as Marcus Washington orchestrated the most significant corporate culture change in Legacy Airlines' history. Screens displayed real-time social media trends, customer feedback, and internal communication metrics. The chaos of the morning had given way to focused determination. The independent auditors need complete access to all complaint records, Marcus instructed the compliance team. Any attempt to obstruct their investigation will result in immediate termination. The severity of the situation had finally penetrated even the most resistant executives. With Emma Roberts' courageous testimony at the press conference followed by the recovery of deleted security footage, denial was no longer a viable strategy. Chairman Davis approached with a tablet displaying a new message. Captain Bryant and Richard Bennett are requesting a private meeting. They say they have information crucial to the company's future. Marcus considered this. They're looking for a settlement. Bring them in, but record everything. 30 minutes later, Captain Bryant and Richard entered the boardroom, noticeably less confident than during their press conference. Their attorney, a sharp-suited woman with a permanent frown, accompanied them. Mr. Washington, began the attorney. My clients recognize that yesterday's events have created certain misunderstandings. They're prepared to issue public statements clarifying their actions in exchange for appropriate compensation and retraction of termination notices. Marcus leaned forward. You're suggesting they'll admit to discrimination if we pay them to do so? That's not, the attorney began, but Richard interrupted. We followed company protocols. If those protocols resulted in what some might perceive as discrimination, that's a training and policy issue, not individual misconduct. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. An interesting perspective. Tell me, was it company protocol to search my belongings without permission? To attempt unauthorized access to my laptop? To file false police reports? Captain Bryant shifted uncomfortably. Extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures. We believed there was a security risk. Based on what evidence? Marcus challenged. The captain had no answer. Let me be clear, Marcus continued. This meeting isn't about negotiating your return. It's about giving you the opportunity to accept accountability before the full investigation makes your positions even more indefensible. The attorney tried again. My clients have decades of service with this airline. Their personnel files contain numerous commendations and numerous buried complaints, Marcus finished. Did you know that 17 formal discrimination complaints were filed against Captain Bryant in the past year alone? All mysteriously marked unsubstantiated, despite video evidence in at least 5 cases. The captain's face reddened. Those complaints were reviewed according to procedure. By your brother-in-law who sat on the board, Marcus noted. A clear conflict of interest that somehow went unaddressed for years. Richard attempted a different approach. The senior crew has significant influence with other employees. A more measured approach to this situation could prevent operational disruptions. Are you threatening workforce action if you don't get your way? Marcus asked calmly. The attorney quickly intervened. My client is simply pointing out practical realities. Here's a practical reality, Marcus replied. Every minute we spend discussing how to minimize consequences for discriminatory behavior is a minute we're not spending fixing the systemic problems that enabled it. He stood, signaling the meeting's end. Your terminations stand. The investigation will proceed. If you choose to take legal action, we welcome the opportunity to present all evidence in court. As they were escorted out, Captain Bryant made one last desperate appeal. The rest of the crew was just following orders. If you want someone to blame, blame me, but let them keep their jobs. Marcus paused, genuinely surprised by this first sign of concern for others. The crew members will have individual reviews based on their actions and willingness to acknowledge mistakes. Those who demonstrated prejudice will face consequences. Those who were caught in a toxic system but showed humanity, like Emma Roberts, will have opportunities to be part of the solution. After they departed, Marcus convened the full board and executive leadership team. The room was packed, with additional participants joining via video conference. Every level of management needed to hear directly what would happen next. Legacy Airlines stands at a crossroads, Marcus began, not just because of yesterday's incidents, but because of years of enabling discrimination while denying its existence. Today, that changes. He outlined a comprehensive transformation plan, independent review of all past discrimination complaints, mandatory sensitivity training for all customer-facing staff, revision of service protocols to eliminate subjective treatment, creation of a passenger bill of rights with clear accountability measures, and establishment of an independent passenger advocacy office with authority to address complaints. These changes aren't suggestions, Marcus emphasized. They're requirements for this airline's continued existence. Anyone who can't fully commit to this transformation should tender their resignation now. No one moved, though several executives looked distinctly uncomfortable. Good, Marcus continued, because accountability starts at the top. Each of you will be evaluated on your past handling of discrimination complaints and your commitment to creating an inclusive culture moving forward. Lawrence Phillips, the operations executive who had been defensive earlier, raised his hand hesitantly. What about the passengers who witnessed yesterday's events, and those who've experienced discrimination in the past? It was the first sign of genuine concern for passengers rather than profits, a small but significant step. Each affected passenger will receive personal apologies and appropriate compensation, Marcus replied. But more importantly, they'll see real change in how this airline operates. Words without action are meaningless. As the meeting progressed, Marcus introduced Sandra Chang and announced her new role heading a special task force on customer experience equity. He also revealed that Emma Roberts would lead a new initiative allowing crew members to report discrimination without fear of retaliation. Legacy Airlines will become the industry standard for equitable treatment, Marcus I concluded, not because it's good PR, though it is, but because it's fundamentally right, and because I will accept nothing less. The transformation had begun. Those who had abused their power were facing consequences. Those who had enabled discrimination through silence were confronting their complicity. And those who had suffered discrimination would finally see justice. As the meeting adjourned, Chairman Davis approached Marcus privately. The board has unanimously approved all your proposals. Even those who initially resisted see the necessity now. Marcus nodded. People can change when the cost of continuing old behaviors becomes higher than the cost of adopting new ones. Today, we change that equation. For the first time since the acquisition, Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The journey ahead would be challenging, but the hardest step had been taken, acknowledging the problem and committing to real change. In that moment, he thought of his mother's words. Power isn't about control. It's about creating change that ordinary people can't achieve alone. Today, he had used his power for exactly that purpose. 6 months later, Marcus Washington stood in the newly redesigned Terminal 3 at San Francisco International Airport, watching passengers board a Legacy Airlines flight, or rather, Equitable Air, as the company had been renamed during its comprehensive rebirth. The transformation had been swift and thorough. New uniforms, new branding, new training programs, and most importantly, a new culture that prioritized dignity and respect for all passengers. But the changes went far beyond cosmetic adjustments. Our customer satisfaction ratings have increased. 63%, reported Sandra Chang, now permanently installed as Chief Experience Officer. And our market share has actually grown despite industry analysts predicting we'd lose business. Marcus nodded, observing the diverse crew welcoming passengers with genuine warmth. How are the former legacy employees adapting? Better than expected, Sandra replied. Once the toxic leadership was removed, many embraced the opportunity to work in an environment where doing the right thing is rewarded rather than punished. They walked together through the terminal, where digital displays showcased the airline's new passenger bill of rights and transparent complaint resolution process. One screen showed real-time statistics, complaints filed, resolution timelines, satisfaction with outcomes, all publicly available. Transparency creates accountability, Marcus noted with approval. Emma Roberts approached, now wearing the uniform of a senior trainer. Mr. Washington, our new crew members have completed the Enhanced Cultural Awareness Program. The first class graduated today. Excellent, Marcus replied. And the mentorship program for minority employees? We've paired 37 junior staff with senior mentors, Emma reported proudly. The retention rate for minority employees has improved by 41% already. These changes hadn't come without resistance. The airline industry's old guard had initially predicted failure for such a politically correct approach to business. Captain Bryant and Richard Bennett had indeed filed wrongful termination lawsuits, claiming they were scapegoats for systemic problems. Their cases had collapsed spectacularly when the evidence became public. Not just the videos from Marcus's flight, but dozens of previously buried complaints with similar patterns of discriminatory behavior. The former executives who had protected them faced their own reckonings. Several resigned in disgrace, others were removed by shareholders, and a few faced legal consequences for destroying evidence of discrimination. The federal investigation into the false police report is concluding next week, Sandra informed Marcus. Bryant and Bennett are expected to accept plea deals rather than risk trial. Justice had taken many forms in the aftermath of that fateful flight. For some, it meant legal consequences. For others, it meant the humbling experience of confronting their own complicity. But for the thousands of passengers who had previously experienced discrimination without recourse, justice meant something more profound. The knowledge that their experiences were finally validated and that real change had occurred. Gabriel Okafor approached with a warm smile, now serving on the airline's passenger advocacy board. The quarterly audit results are in, he reported. Customer satisfaction scores for minority passengers now match those of white passengers. The first time any major airline has achieved equity in treatment. This was perhaps the most meaningful measure of success. Equitable Air wasn't just talking about equal treatment, it was delivering it, measurably and consistently. Marcus checked his watch. Is everything ready for the announcement? Sandra nodded. The press is assembled in the conference room. All major networks and travel industry publications are represented. Today marked the official unveiling of Equitable Air's revolutionary new service model, one that would eventually transform the entire industry. The core innovation was simple yet profound: standardized service protocols that eliminated subjective treatment while still allowing for personalization based on stated preferences, rather than assumptions. As Marcus prepared to address the media, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 6 months ago, he had been denied a meal on a flight because of his race. Today, he was redefining what air travel could be for millions of passengers. The press conference went smoothly, with industry analysts asking penetrating questions about implementation costs and training requirements. Marcus addressed each query with the confidence of someone whose vision had already been validated by results. Some called these changes idealistically impractical, a reporter noted. Yet your quarterly earnings show a 28% increase. How do you explain this counterintuitive outcome? Marcus smiled. It's only counterintuitive if you believe treating people with dignity is bad business. We've found the opposite to be true. Passengers choose airlines they trust, Employees perform better in environments where they're respected, and shareholders benefit from the resulting growth. After the formal announcement, Marcus took a moment alone by the windows, overlooking the tarmac. A sleek, equitable airplane taxied toward the runway, its new livery gleaming in the afternoon sun, a visual symbol of the transformation that had occurred. His phone buzzed with a notification, the final judgment in the class action lawsuit, filed by passengers who had experienced discrimination on Legacy Airlines, had been announced. The court had approved the settlement, which included not just financial compensation, but required ongoing compliance with the new service standards Marcus had implemented. As he watched the plane accelerate down the runway and lift gracefully into the sky, Marcus thought about his next flight. Unlike most CEOs, he still flew commercially, often in economy class, but now he did so on his own airline, experiencing firsthand the service model he had created, one where every passenger, regardless of appearance or background, received the same level of respect and care. The flight that had begun with discrimination had ultimately landed in transformation. Legacy's legacy of prejudice had been replaced by Equitable's promise of fairness. And for Marcus Washington, the journey had come full circle, from being powerless in the face of injustice to using his power to ensure such injustice could not persist. As he turned to leave, an airline employee approached respectfully. "Your flight to Chicago is boarding in 30 minutes, Mr. Washington. Would you like to head to the gate?" "Thank you," Marcus replied with a smile. "Economy section, right?" "Yes, sir, just as you requested." Some habits were worth keeping after all. The best way to ensure Equitable Air maintained its commitment to all passengers was to regularly experience the service as an ordinary customer. Power used wisely meant remembering where you came from and ensuring others were treated with the dignity everyone deserved. Marcus Washington headed toward his gate, not as a CEO but as a passenger, one among many in a transformed system that now worked as it always should have. The true victory wasn't in firing a discriminatory crew. It was in creating a world where such discrimination could no longer thrive. Marcus Washington's journey reveals powerful truths about discrimination and accountability in today's world. The most profound lesson is that real change often requires power from within the system. While speaking up against injustice is essential, transformation sometimes demands the authority to implement structural changes. The story also highlights how discrimination thrives when protected by those with authority. Captain Bryant and Richard's behavior persisted because the system shielded them through family connections, buried complaints, and a culture of silence. This protection created the illusion that discriminatory actions had no consequences. Another critical lesson is the difference between performative statements and meaningful action. Legacy Airlines had likely issued numerous statements about valuing diversity, yet allowed discriminatory practices to continue. When Marcus took control, he implemented concrete changes, transparent complaint processes, accountability measures, and consequences for discriminatory behavior. The power of documentation proved crucial. Sandra's videos, passenger testimonials, and Emma's insider knowledge created undeniable evidence that couldn't be dismissed as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. In fighting discrimination, documented proof often makes the difference between being ignored and creating accountability. Perhaps most importantly, the story demonstrates that ethical business practices and financial success aren't mutually exclusive. By creating an airline that treated all passengers with dignity, Marcus didn't just correct an injustice, he built a more successful company. Justice and prosperity can go hand in hand when organizations recognize that treating people with dignity is good business. The ultimate lesson is that power, when wielded ethically, can transform broken systems rather than merely punish individuals. Marcus could have simply fired the discriminatory crew and continued business as usual, but he recognized that sustainable change required addressing the root causes that allowed discrimination to flourish in the first place. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have revealed your ownership immediately during the flight, or waited until landing as he did? Comment below with what action you would have taken if faced with such blatant discrimination. If you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination in customer service, share your story. Your voice matters and could help others facing similar situations. Has someone ever underestimated you based on your appearance only to be surprised when they discovered who you really were? Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in accountability, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this powerful message about standing up against injustice. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about triumph over discrimination and the power of taking a stand. Thank you for watching, and remember, true change happens when people with power choose to use it responsibly. May we all find ways to create more equitable spaces in our own spheres of influence.